Season 18, episode number 3, number 111 overall, 111, 111. Full Circle, the beginning of a trilogy of stories called the E-Space Trilogy. What happens in Full Circle, dear?
Time is a circle, a flat circle. And so things happen, and then they happen again, and they happen again, and then they happen again, and they happen again, and they
There's
happen
actually
again.
a really good audio story that's like this. That's like things happening over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets really super abstract because it's like, hey, we've been walking in this corridor for what feels like hours upon days, and like I haven't gotten hungry, and it's like, you're still holding my hand, right? And it's like, I can't feel your hand. And it like gets really abstract into like, wait, we've been holding hands for so long that our hands have like merged and we can't let go now. It's really good.
Okay.
Scherzo. Look up Scherzo. It's a really good.
That
was Full Circle though.
That made me uncomfortable a little bit thinking about that. Anyway, so in Full Circle.
Oh, it's truly horrifying.
The Doctor is doing stuff with coordinates, and Romana's like, Also, what about Leela? We have to go back to the Time Lords, and Romana has a hissy fit because she doesn't want to go. They probably will take Romana back because she doesn't want to go back. She's having a hissy fit because she was only there for the timepieces, right? Doctor doesn't really want to not go, and they're just like, okay, I guess we're going no matter what. But then something happens, and even K9 can't comprehend it. Neither can the Doctor, and then the K9 lost the TARDIS control. I yawned. K9 lost control of the TARDIS, and then he gets it back, and he's like, I can't explain or give data because I just don't get it. And the Doctor doesn't believe that nothing is wrong. But then they materialize, and the window looks like it's Gallifrey, and they're like, okay, Romana's really fucking sad. The Doctor doesn't fucking care. They go outside, and shocking, this isn't Gallifrey. Also, there's naked men swimming in a river. Also, there's a whole bunch of people wearing yellow. It's a cult. Great. Awesome. Are people doing the wearing yellow things, like gathering and foraging? They're doing the people wearing yellow are doing people wearing yellow things, like gathering and foraging. And then a bunch of non-yellow wearers come in with knives and steal some food and run. And the yellow boys chase them, and then they give up the chase, and the Goonies are having an argument about seeing something. And then they put a bunch of melons on the table, and the yellow people are cutting open them, and they're like, there's a trace here of something that we're not going to say. And the Doctor's still confused. He's like, maybe this is Gallifrey. I don't understand. This is weird. Then there's maybe insect eggs in the fruit, and then they talk about having system files, and now they have to proceed, of course, to the procedure. And then the new yellow kid shows up and asks to be an outler. Outler. Couldn't have just said outlier, but outler. And he's very good at math. And he's like, I'll be not on the ship. I'm not going to be on this planet when the ship leaves. I'm going to be somewhere else. Apparently. And apparently the leader of the Goonies is his brother, but he's like, I broke my ties with my family. I don't give a fuck. Don't touch his good math badge, though. His good boy math badge is his. Do not touch it. So they go,
Do not touch the good boy math badge.
Yes. So, like, okay, prove yourself. And then you could earn this badge, which is a badge that we made out of weeds. It's better than yours, apparently.
Oh.
We don't know why, but it is. And they're like, okay. And the Deciders are just looking at sciencey stuff. And apparently that insecty thing is infectious and not in a good way. And I, in fact, forgot this entire conversation happened. Meanwhile, Math Kid is swimming up to prove that he's the bestest. And then he gets out and sneaks around, and then the river starts to boil for some reason. Everyone's like, what? But of course, Math Kid I thought was in the water and dying. I think it was just 2 people were in the water and dying. But now it's the coming of Mistfall, but don't be alarmed. But of course, everyone is very alarmed. Cut back to the Goonies watching Math Kid steal some fucking fruit. However, he is seen by the old Decider dude, and he runs, and then the old man grabs him and tries to take him to the Starliner, and then the old man falls and probably breaks his neck. And the kid's like, oh god. And then this misfall is apparently not good. And they're like, oh my god, where are the Outlers? They're just children. What do we do? Oh god, are we going to just let them die? Because one of them is the dad. And he's like, my daughter's out there. I need her. I need
my child.
So cutting back to the old man, he doesn't seem to actually be dead, but then he is pulled into the mud, so he is dead. And he's like, he says the name of the episode full circle for a second, then he's like, I'm dead. But then the kid runs away and finds the TARDIS and goes, knock, 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 hi, hello, oh god. And then he's brought inside and faints. And the Outlers are like, it's Mistfall. And the leader goes, no, it's not. That's a myth. And they're like, well, if you're wrong, we're dead. Great. Cool. Math Kid has woken up at the TARDIS and mentions Mistfall. The dad is still upset about his daughter's death. And the Deciders are like, I get it. Just get over it, lol. And Romana thinks the kid is lying about what he saw. And he's like, I saw a blue box and it had 2 doors and I don't understand where I am. And the doctor's like, he's obviously like not being crazy. Like he knows what he saw. And Romana's like, wait, what about the scanner? What's going on? Why can't we focus on one thing? Why do we have negative coordinates? Doctor, please! And then K9 is taken outside and says the fog is non-toxic, which is good. Romana hands the Math Kid a device because he's like, I'm going to go check on my friends. And he's like, okay. She's like, how is your knee? And he's like, oh, it's good. It heals instantly. Look, it's healed. But then K9, while staring out at the water, says, alert, something is coming out of the water. And then something comes out of the water.
Ishmarshman.
Yeah.
So, in order to avoid straightforward alien sounds for the Marshman, Dick Mills, who is... credited in this as special sound.
Dick Mill.
He went to a pig farm to record porcine noises under various conditions. The Radiophonic Workshop had small windowless studios, so imagine how popular he was. With bringing a pig in there. Adric, who's smart math boy, got his name from an anagram of Dirac, as in Paul Dirac, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist and mathematician, who, amongst other things, came up with the first version of antimatter theory. The original idea had been to allocate a marsh child, most of Adric's plot functions, although it's kind of not 100% confirmed. And that marsh child was going to become a new companion and, become more Time Lordy as the series went on. It was a weird idea that they kind of threw out there. But then they decided on doing something else instead. And they changed the story around anyway. Also, in order to make the planet Alzeria seem more alien, powder paint was dusted on the fronds of tropical plants, and multiple lights with different colored filters were shone on the locations. The script speaks of suns, and it's kind of the exact same location as a few other episodes were filmed, but the fact that they are able to add and change lighting and put shit on the plants does actually make it not that visible that it's the same place as other places. As other episodes were filmed. Anyway, what happens in the next part, dear?
Well, flashbacks to all that stuff that just happened, by the way, real quick. And then the dude wades through the water towards the shore, and they look like catfish, and that's weird. And then on land, they stop moving for a second, and the doctor attempts to sneak away, because apparently they're adapting. Math Boy came to get the other kids, and they don't believe him, even though he shows them the homing device, and they're like, what the fuck? And the group wants to go to the TARDIS, and he's like, no, you're not allowed to do that. But they're like, no, we're going, for some reason. The water dudes are acclimating to the planet, and K9 is sent to watch after them. However, one came out of the water late, and I guess it's a kid, and the doctor sees it, and then he runs away. Yeah, that's the whole thing. Cut to the kids making their way into the TARDIS, and Romana's now at knife point. Fucking hate kids. They're taking the TARDIS.
Mood.
One of the old dudes saw the system files, and he's in emotional psychic pain from reading them, apparently. Then they talk about the dad being a decider or not, and he's like, yeah, I'll take it. And now basically he's like, fuck my daughter, the community matters more. K9 is following the things, but is stopped by a river for a bit because he can't cross water. Meanwhile, Math Kid wrestles the knife away from Romana, and she's just like, here, you can have your knife back. Just don't be an asshole, please. Romana tries to push a button on the TARDIS, and it goes batshit. The Doctor is looking around and notices that the TARDIS is no longer in the place he left it. Also, Fish Kid is following him. Something supposedly picked up the TARDIS, so the Doctor is going to go to that other ship and knock. And he tries his screwdriver on it a bit, and the door opens, and he comes inside, but there's nobody around. He stabs a melon that he finds with a knife, and then walks away. And then the kid fish follows and takes that knife. Meanwhile, the yellow guys are having a sermon about what's going on and to get back to work. And the Doctor closes the ship door, and it just kind of fucks off, and the TARDIS seems to have landed now. And they're like, okay, well, let's look outside, because it might be Gallifrey, I don't know. They open the door. It's that kid cave that the Goonies were in, but it's full of fish people now. They're fish Goonies.
Goonie cave!
And the Doctor is fucking around in the ship, and the fish kid is also following around. But then some yellow dudes find the fish kid, freak out, but then the Doctor comes in and goes, look, it's terrified. Stop being fucking scary. Stop it. And then one of the yellow dudes knocks the fucking Doctor out while he's trying to help, and then they capture the fish, and they're like, dragging them into the room with the deciders. The Doctor's like, don't fuck with the fish, he's fine. And then the Power Rangers stand up and go, what the fuck? I am Red Ranger. What the fuck? I am Blue Ranger, basically. And introduce themselves. The deciders are really weird. K9 is still following the fishes, which leads him to that cave. And he's like, don't attack me, I'm just here for information. And then his head gets fucking knocked off. And Romana's only a little bit sad about this. Apparently, the TARDIS is going to be used as a battering ram to the Starliner, from what they can assume. And they've apparently been lying this entire time about the mist being toxic as fuck. And on examination of the fishy, they call it useless because it's not aggressive at all, and that's weird. Romana is going to move the TARDIS, but then the fishy dudes are all leaving. So, like, why? Cut to a spider and another hatching out of the river fruit, and all the kids are like, ah, and run in the TARDIS and shut the door behind them, leaving Romana outside. And she's like, what the fuck are you doing? And then Math Kid is like, stop, and tries to open the door, but turns on the TARDIS swoosh swoosh switch, like a dumbass. Romana, the swoosh swoosh switch, yes, like a dumbass. And then Romana tries to defend herself from the spiders, but then she fucking dies because one bit her.
As they do.
It's this, look, it's the switch that makes the TARDIS go shoo shoo shoo.
To be fair, that's what most of the switches do.
That's fair.
So, on hearing the actors that played the Deciders singing in a close harmony during their lunch break while they were still in costume as well, John Nathan Turner took to referring them as the Decider Sisters. Because apparently on the lunch break they would just like sing shit together. So J&T was just like, you are the Decider Sisters. I don't know, I thought it was funny. The writer Andrew Smith was only 17 when this episode aired. Apparently he'd been submitting stories since he was 15, and it had been determined to become a writer from a very early age and joining the Writers Guild as soon as he was able. Apparently his earliest proposal to the show, something called The Secret of Cassius, had drawn favorable comments, but didn't get picked up. But Christopher Bidmead, the script editor, he had an ambition to sort of form a workshop for new writers, because again, they were still kind of struggling to find new writers for the show. He was determined to create a workshop to like get new writers in, basically teach them how to write for Doctor Who and get new ideas into the show. He basically had him lined up for it, but also the BBC lawyers were like, hey, this is going to cause some problems about possible rights issues with episodes and stuff, so you're not going to do this. But because of the names he already lined up for it, he kept them in mind and was like, well, do you have anything? And that's where this came from. And the story was a little bit different in the beginning. It's important to realize that this is kind of the first time that a script has been made by a, like, paid up by a Doctor Who fan. The presentation and the logic of the story is entirely that of previous tales. The original draft, Alzarius, was called Jölfelag, which is Gallifrey backwards. Get it? Because negative coordinates. Yeah, it's really dumb. I'm glad they got rid of it. And the contrast between the Deciders and the Outliers... I keep wanting to say Outliers, but it's not. It's Outlers.
They should have just said Outliers.
They should have said Outliers. Were precisely the same as those between the Time Lords and the Dropouts, which we saw in the Invasion of Time. Or, like, the Sever Team and the Tesh from Leela's first episode. The original idea for a new companion, Marsha... was the process of adapting to new circumstances was what good characters did. Initially, the Deciders scanned people at birth to assess who was, quote, elite, and then exiled disruptive elements. Sort of pretty bog-standard Doctor Who moral shit. Although, as standard as an 18-year-old who watched Doctor Who at the time knew. Which means this kid growing up, writing for Doctor Who now, would have grown up with 70s Doctor Who, which was the third Doctor, so it's a lot of moral stories, a lot of the grown-ups are wrong, and the dropouts and the punks are always correct, and they're the ones in the right. And very influenced by Robert Holmes as well, so you have a lot of these moral societal tales of skepticism and sort of questioning authority, and especially influenced by Malcolm Hulke as well. The point is that this is where a generational shift is, not just in the writing, but also the way that television is being presented and sold to the audience. There are differences in what viewers are supposed to just accept. It's hard to see that, like, this is his only completed script that he had at the time. So he had a few more, apparently. But in this, we don't have lengthy speeches about the ethics of vivisection, about, dissecting the Marshmen. It's just a simple, unfortunate consequence, and each side sort of reacts according to their positions. We have a speech about procrastination and bureaucracy, but it's sort of short-circuited when we find out why that's all happening. So it's like the kid kinda understands this sort of moral writing for Doctor Who, but also misses the mark a tiny bit. But it's these things of, like, you're in an age of television where the sort of things that Doctor Who used to have to explain back in the 60s, like, even basic time travel or spaceships or elements like gravity or planetary functions, you don't need to explain it anymore, because a lot of fantasy things that Doctor Who had when it was in the 60s has now been, like, replicated and shown prime time for decades now. So you don't have to explain the concept of gravity or the concept of a planetary axis rotation anymore, because people just know it now. So it's sort of like the growing education of the show needs to change along with that, which is kind of what they're doing. We'll get to a little bit more at the end of the next episode, because I do want to talk about it more, because it kind of fascinates me, the change of both how the show is consumed and how it's written, considering the era. But what happens in the next part, dear? Spiders?
Yeah, spiders mostly.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
They look pretty cool, the spiders.
Well, the Doctor is now looking at a fish who's asleep. A whole sleep. The other scientist basically goes...
one whole sleep?
Yes. They're made to kill us. Okay. That's their skills. I took samples. And the entire ship is going to leave, right? So why worry about them? Look at this tissue sample of the fish. And the Doctor's like, you took their skin? And the Doctor wants to find his TARDIS and wants to leave, and everyone's like, yeah, do not do that. Show us how you open the door so we can stop people from doing that. And the TARDIS is fucking off somewhere. And the kids are upset because Romana had set the coordinates to somewhere, but they don't know where they're going. Meanwhile, there are fish in the woods. Full stop.
Oh.
The doctor is walking around and now talking about what the fuck is going on. Why are they removing good shit? And the doctor is upset. And the dad is like, okay, listen, I'm going to go outside with the doctor because my daughter's out there. Fuck everybody else. And then the TARDIS shows up and the doctor's like, yeah, cool. That made that easy. But then all the kids come out of the ship and not Romana. And he's like, what the fuck? And he's like, okay, I guess we're going to go back to wherever the short trip was, even though this shouldn't work because the TARDIS doesn't like short trips. And then we find Romana saying yes a lot and staring into space. And also, who are you? It says, she's like, who the fuck are you? The Deciders are like, wait, we should do experiments on this child. Okay, yes, but keep it secret. And Romana is now in a coma, and K9's head was lost in the cave. And the Outliers are like, guess we'll die, lol. Oh well. And the Deciders basically talk about keeping them all the information to not happen at all because, secrets of the fish kid, don't worry about it. Then the Deciders go into another room and go, hi kids, you're all fucking assholes, but also your children. So no punishment, go do repairs. And they're like, okay. And then the TARDIS swoops back inside the ship again. And the fish is going to have a brain experiment, so it'll probably die. But while doing so, Romana is fucking screaming. And the fish breaks its chains and gets all angry. And we see its face of the doctor. It sees the face of the doctor in the call mirror thing, whatever. And tries to slap it really hard. And it shocks him so hard that he lays down and probably dies. The doctor is trying to call everyone out because it's the ship, because of the shit that is happening. And he's like, these pieces are just being replaced constantly. What the fuck is your issue? And they're like, we want the ship to take off. It's not ready. And they're like, look at this. And he rips down all their wallpaper and goes, look, you could leave in half an hour, you fucking imbeciles. And they're like, okay, listen. Here's the issue. I never learned how to read. Actually, I never learned how to pilot the ship. No one can pilot it. And he's just like, okay. And the Goonies are walking around the ship doing things, and the doctor is analyzing the spider to see what's going on with Romana. And the mistfall has also never been analyzed, and the Deciders are the only ones that know what the mist is about. So wait, hold on, let me look at that slide of that fish skin. But then Math Kid runs in and goes, Romana's gone! And cut to Romana wandering around the ship, apparently dropping trash as she goes, which is kind of hilarious. And because the doctor is following her by following the trail of broken shit. And it's just like, okay. And Romana is now very veiny in the face and opens the door and lets all the fish boys inside.
All the fish boys are let inside.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Delicious fish. Yum, 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 yum. So, after kind of two false starts, the Leisure Hive and Meglos, they kind of don't really fit anywhere else. They're kind of false starts to this era. This episode is definitely where John Nathan Turner's era really kicks into gear. And the biggest change, perhaps, is who the program seems to be aimed at. So, the script editor before Bidmead, Douglas Adams, famously said that his brief was to make the plot simple enough for adults to follow, but complicated enough to keep children interested. Which hints at something sort of key about the 70s series, that it was deliberately pitched at two separate audiences, providing science trickery for clever clogs, and monster costumes for, the commoners. Graham Williams did, after all, see his job to provide something for everyone, but rather than splitting up the high concept and the crowd pleasers, the stories made in this period tend to turn to the big ideas, such as they are into visual events. So suddenly everything's designed to work on one level. Depending on your perspective, this either gives the storytelling a new sense of purpose, or makes the whole program look as if it's just for 14-year-old boys, which was kind of Lala Ward's view. She still loudly complains about the production team robbing the program of its, quote, magic by getting rid of K9 constantly. So the big idea in this episode, if you haven't picked up on it yet, is evolution. The people on Alzarius turn out... Spoiler. The people on Alzarius turn out to be the Marshmen, and from a science fiction geek's point of view, this is kind of no big thing, and anyone taking biology at an A level would have seen the kind of catastrophic flaws in the plot. But the 80s were a boom time for documentaries about evolution versus creationism, because for a few reasons, it was kind of worrying the amount of people that were still kind of resistant to the idea of evolution in the 80s. Especially children from non-denominational families tend to stray towards the idea that some great creator made all the animals in the earth out of, plasticine or whatever. Earlier Doctor Who seasons dealt with concepts at least as complex as this, yet the Marshmen are designed to make it all seem corporeal. It's typical of the new regime. The monsters aren't just tacked onto the story, they are the story. Like, you cannot take the Marshmen out of this story without taking the message out of it. So it's like, this is an era where it's no longer a moral story with monsters tacked on. It's like, no, hang on, we have monsters inherently in this show. Why don't we actually use the monsters to tell the story? But the script editor of this era had a policy of education, education, and education. So the plot of Full Circle comes across as kind of a primer on the subject of evolution, much in the same way that a future episode comes across as a primer on the concept of entropy. The early 80s seemed an opportune time for this sort of thing, because it was kind of the beginning of what we might now call the hypertext age. The late 60s and early 70s had expanded the vocabulary of fantasy, and at least in the imagination of the general public, the adventures of space and in space and time could be psychological, biological, and mythical instead of just, Martians and moon bases and men from Mars invading. Like, they could actually tackle these different concepts. By 1980, these ideas had become such common currency that they no longer needed to be explained. Sort of the bizarre and often trippy sci-fi movies that followed in the wake of 2001: A Space Odyssey were being shown on television, letting the whole family see things which had once only appealed to a minority audience. The kids were reading increasingly grim and increasingly science fiction literate comic books, and most notably the early punkish issues of 2000 AD, and even American sci-fi television at its most crass was beginning to draw on more complex kind of iconography. The mind tricks that that Doctor Who had used when Barry Letts and Philip Hinchcliffe had been in charge were now basically kind of standard in any fantasy production, so you couldn't really just use them in Doctor Who anymore. You had to do something different. And also soon, affordable domestic video would arrive to make basic cinematic source material even more accessible. Because, the VHS boom of, home video. The influence of the 60s and 70s anthropological sci-fi sort of comes through loud and clear in this episode. It resembles nothing so much as Planet of the Apes, and supposedly the scene of the bestial marsh child being dragged into the Starliner in a net makes you wonder if it's like, shrieking something along the lines of, "You stink, you damn dirty apes," or "You stinking humans," or something like that.
Yeah.
The notion of a planet that also works as a single ecosystem hints at, Gaia mythology, which we've touched on before in, like, Planet of Evil. But this is much more restrained rendering of the idea than usual. Like, in Planet of Evil, it's very overt. Like, if you took... That was the really bad one, where if you took something off the planet, the ship dragged back towards the planet, because it was all... it was a bad one. Well, this one's more subtle in its approach. So it's like, there's no... Like, whereas that one, it was like, oh my god, the planet's malicious. It's evil. It's all this one force. There's no evil intelligence controlling everything. Like, if this story was written in the 60s or even some areas in the 70s, there would have been like, there's an evil intelligence controlling the Marshmen, and that's why they're evil and attacking everyone. It's not, hey, these Marshmen are basically like primitives. Like, they are basically like cavemen because they are you. Like, it's like they're acting like this because they're confused and scared, which is a hint of evolution in the story writing as well. But yeah, anyway, what happens in the next part, dear?
You mean the last part?
Yeah, the next part, the final part.
All right. Well, let me just have a quick sip of water real fast because my throat is. Mm. All right. Well, the fishmen are now just walking around the ship. Romana has opened another door, so there's more fishmen. And then they start to attack men, but then they drop all the mahjong tiles, and they're like, "Ooh, mahjong tiles," and pick them up instead.
No!
And the doctor is informed of how much it takes, how long it takes for Math Kid to heal, and then he's like, "That's weird." And then there's an alert to take cover, and the Goonies show up, and the doctor and Math Kid are like, "Everybody to the science area, wee!" And the Deciders for a second think the doctor fucked them, and then they go, "Nah," and they're like, "Oh god, what do we do?" And the doctor goes to check on someone on the ground, and the fish with a big stick and Canine's head on it is here, so we grab it and use his face to ward them off, but oh, here comes Romana, and she's kind of scary. And in the science room, no one's helping much because they're just hanging out, and for some reason, Math Kid steals one of the, like, visualizers from the microscope, and then the doctor has realized that Romana's fucked up and tries to reason with her and goes, you know, K9, you know the TARDIS, stay by the TARDIS, and then he leaves. And then the Goonies want to do something, and Math is upset, and the Deciders are talking about fish people and what they should do. Still, about it. The fishmen break into the room, knock over everyone's things, don't really seem to be hurting people that much. The science room is now barricaded, but when a thing is put in the microscope, it goes, oop, pop, oop, broke. And then we get the stolen one back, and he's like, all right, whatever. And then we're trying to figure out what's going on, and the doctor looks at the slides, and the Goonies are apparently smart enough to make a thing that fixes Romana, but okay. The really old Decider is now dying, and goes to find the doctor, and we try to, to find the doctor so we can fly the Starliner. Because supposedly they can't return to home because they've never been there in the first place. What? The fishmen are fucking breaking in now to the science place, and the doctor has to avoid all contact with the fishies, and he just kind of sprays them with oxygen so much that they can't adapt to it. And they're like, all right, cool. But Romana's creeping on the situation, and then creeping on the doctor, but then she gets oxygen to the face and faints, and supposedly their evolution has been going super fucking fast, and we say more science stuff, and Romana wakes up. And the spiders apparently turned into the marsh creatures and so on and so forth, and then they turned into them. And Romana is like, this is weird. What the fuck? The Goonies tried to close the door, but it's pulled away, and Math opens it to try to save him. But then he's been blue-veined, so his brother is now dead. Here, take your dead brother's rope, 'cause you deserve it, Math child. But now they're letting the oxygen into the entire building to see the fishmen run away. And the doctor's like, actually don't kill them? But then the Decider's like, no, we're not. We aren't them. What the fuck? They're like, right? And what the hell? This is so fucked up. And then the doctor's like, you're fucking idiots. The fish learned to get out, so they're going to come in at some point, right? And the doctor's like, you idiots. Don't even understand what's going on. The doctor's asked to fly the Starliner, and he's like, nah. And then Math Kid leaves that image, whatever, in the TARDIS out of kindness. And then the doctor points out how to fly the ship when finally told to do the thing. And then he's like, just push the green button. You're good. Leaves. And they're like, oh god, wait. And he's like, nope, green button, bye. Romana notices that the image translator was left for them. And now they know that they're in exospace. Science bullshit. They need to find another one of those exo whatever the fuck. Also, K9, I guess, is repaired sometime. Yeah.
K9's... He'll be repaired properly. I'm sure everything's gonna be fine. So that's full circle.
Mm-hmm.
We have begun our dive into the trilogy that is the E-Space trilogy. We're now in E-Space, baby.
Is that like esports?
How do we get out? Yeah, it's like esports. It's electronic space.
Cool.
So that's E-Space. That's full circle. Mm-hmm. What did you think, dear?
I mean, like a 4, really. It wasn't the best. I don't hate it, but like I don't really want to watch it more.
No, that's fair.
At all, ever.
That's fair.
Just I'm
Next
good.
episode. Next episode, we get to something I've been waiting for a while.
Yep.
Blank. Okay, there's 2 words. Which one do you want to guess? It's blank of blank. Which one do you want to guess?
The easier one.
Oh, don't say that. State of blank.
Fear.
No.
The Union.
State of the Union. They attend the President of the United States State of the Union.
Yes, I'm glad I got a laugh out of you.
You know what? Yeah, the USA is in E-space, dear. You're correct. The USA is in E-space.
The state of everything.
State of decay.
Okay. Oh, wait, that's... Okay.
Yeah. It is.
I will say I was jokingly, like, trying to not go with, like, just generic titles that have already been a thing, but I guess that was a bad choice.
To be fair, this one was kind of ahead. This one came out way before the video game.
I know.
But this isn't about zombies. This is about
But it could be.
another horror icon.
Oh. I don't know why I just sounded like the dog of wisdom.
What was that?
I don't know.
Yeah, I was about to say, why'd you sound like a werewolf?
I was gonna
You're just
say.
like, "Arrgh."
I was gonna say the dog of wisdom. Let's just. I'm done. I'm out.
Arrgh. Ha!
That video.
State of Decay. Next episode.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.